All right.
But
So Maureen, I'll let you go ahead and start.
Thank you so much, Ayana, and thanks to all of you who are on the line. Really appreciate taking the time.
It's like a boat.
We're just muting a couple more lines. Yeah, so sorry. So I hope folks fared this nasty weather okay. I'm glad you were able to make it on the call today. I'm Maureen Gallagher. I'm the policy director here at Jane Doe, and I've been at Jane Doe for now almost 8.5 years, because this will be my 9th budget. That's how I can, you know, that's how I gauge my years at Jane Doe. So we're going to be talking today about Advocacy Day and preparing for that. And with me is Marcia Szymanski, who's dialing in from New Hope. Marcia, do you just want to say hello and introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here in snowy Attleboro. So I'm the executive director at New Hope. I've been here about 3.5 years. And prior to this, I worked in Brockton. So I've done many, many lobby days, and it's always an exciting time. And I hope that we can provide you guys with some information, some important information. So take it away, Maureen.
Great, thanks. And Marcia is also a member of the Jane Doe Policy Committee. The Policy Committee is made up of about 6 program directors from across the state who we're on the phone together every couple of weeks and give us a lot of advice and feedback to Jane Doe on budget and policy issues. So Marcia has played a really critical role in that. So thanks, Marcia.
You're welcome.
I am going to turn off my camera so you can't see me, which is just fine.
Mine as well.
We can focus on that. Sort of PowerPoint will kind of walk us through what we're doing today. There we go. So welcome. So hopefully, our objectives today are to really provide folks information about the day itself, March 26th, to folks who haven't participated before, but also some who have. It's going to look a little different than the last couple years. To talk about what our objectives of the day are, some tips, and get a little bit more into detail on that budget and legislative asks. And then, of course, answer any questions that you might have. And as Ayana suggested, if you do have questions throughout the program and the presentation, please put them in the chat box, and we will try to address them as they come in. And we'll also have some time at the end in case we don't quite catch them in the moment. So we're gonna get started with a poll question. Shortly, you'll see something pop up on your screen that will ask you this question. If folks could just take a minute to answer, how many Jane Doe Advocacy Days have you attended in the past? So we'll just take a minute while you click on your publish results. Okay, good. This is great. Looks like most people are clicking in. Most of you, this will be your first day, so this is great. This is a great opportunity to get some information. We have a couple of very seasoned participants who've been to more than 5 advocacy days, so that's really helpful. So if you folks have any experiences you want to chime in with, please feel free to chat those in your chat box as well. Great. We're gonna move on. Excellent. So we're going to start with the just the logistics. Excuse me. What is the day going to look like? You know, folks, hopefully you've already registered, and we can talk about that a little at the end. And hopefully you're coming with teams, but we also know that sometimes, you know, you're coming with maybe 1 or 2 folks. You may be coming with 5 or 6 or even more. And that's everybody's welcome. So that's great. So we'll be having our Advocacy Day actually at the State House today, this year, sorry. And we'll be meeting at the Great Hall, which is on the 2nd floor of the State House. The State House on Beacon Street here, there's parking information that we post on Member Lodge, and I'll share a link at the end about how you can get all the information around parking. You want to give yourself a little bit of time in the morning, because sometimes there's lines to get in the building. There is security at the State House, but it does not require identification. You will be required to go through a metal detector. So similar to an airport, except not even that extensive. You won't have to take off your shoes, but just be prepared that you'll need to be running your materials through the metal detector. So once we all gather at the State House, we're asking folks to come between 9:30 and 10. We'll have some signage by the Great Hall so folks can come in. We'll have a registration sort of sign-in space where members will come in, check in with us, let us know you're here, collect materials. This is a public event, unlike when we've done it off-site at a breakfast briefing, but we'll have a place for members to come and pick up packets to meet with your legislators, pick up packets for yourselves, check in, ask questions, kind of connect. We'll have coffee and pastries, but nothing super extensive, so you might want to eat breakfast before you come. And then the program will run from 10 to 11. So during that program, we'll have a number of speakers who are talking about the budget requests and the couple of legislative priorities that we'll be really focusing on that day. And we'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. And then there'll be time we can stay in that space for networking, connecting with other member programs. Maybe you're partnering with folks on your legislative visits. And are asking folks to schedule your legislative visits after noon, just because sometimes things run long, you don't want to have to be late, but just as an aside to that, if you have a legislator that can only meet you at 11 o'clock or 10:30, that's also fine. You can leave the program, go meet with your legislator, but if you have a choice and an option, we recommend folks do that in the afternoon. And then later, we typically have folks, the office of Jane Doe, for folks who don't know, is at 14 Beacon Street, right across the street from the State House. So people can come in, they can debrief, let us know anything they want us to know about how your meetings went, fill out feedback forms, get a cup of coffee. We will be open, here all afternoon. So that's sort of the main logistics. And just a note on legislative meetings, just please, if you're coming and haven't scheduled those yet, please do that. You can stop by legislative offices, but you're less likely to be able to sit down and have a conversation with a legislator or a legislative aide. So this is just a little bit more about what you can expect on Advocacy Day. We provide packets for legislators, and so we'll have one for each legislator, and it will have the same material that you will also get in a folder. So it will have information on our budget requests, on legislative priorities, the fact sheets. We have some data sheets, information that we put together so that you have sort of a nice package and a folder to drop off at legislators and leave behind for your meetings. But we also want to encourage you to bring your own program-specific information. If you have your own brochures, what the services that you provide, specific projects you want to talk about, anything else that you want to share with them. So it's not one or the other. We definitely want, part of your role is to actually be talking to them about what is happening in your communities and services you provide and what's needed.
And can I just add, Maureen, can I just add that stuff is really important, that second, the program information, because my experience is that legislators really want to know what's happening in their district. So the more you can provide about your program, I think the better it is. So I just want to highlight that.
I think that's exactly right. I would say that, I meet with legislators a lot, and it's one thing for them to talk to someone from Jane Doe, but it is really important and makes a significant difference for them to talk to someone in their community. It's really more compelling, and you're their constituent or you're serving their constituent, so that's really what matters. And so kind of going on that, Marcia, keeping going with that, I'd love for you to talk about the role of the local program in these legislative meetings.
Okay, happy to. As I said, really, my experience calling on legislators is that they want to hear from the local programs. They want to know what's happening in their district, how you're serving the constituents, and what you're seeing. And as it says up on your screen, the idea of personal stories. Obviously, if you can bring a survivor, that's the ultimate, that's the gold standard, but we know lots of survivors are very hesitant to speak in public, and also it's a work day. Many of them are not able to get to the State House on a Monday during the day. But you can tell those stories, and I think there's nothing like a story to really illustrate the importance of the work that you're doing. So if you have a story that you can bring, this is really important, and it can really illustrate the need for these services. So I think if you can make that connection or help make that connection to the legislature, like this funding is supporting X, Y, or Z. Here's what we're doing with the money that we get through the state. I think helping to connect those dots are really important.
That's great. And I think that, you know, in one of our workshops in the last couple of months, someone made a comment about how important it is for advocates and folks in communities to be talking to legislators. And we're going to talk after this a lot about kind of nitty-gritty stuff about the budget and legislation. And we want you to talk about that, and you're going to have a lot of materials. But the additional thing, and maybe the primary thing you can bring, is information that only you can share with them. You know, that they can't get from a fact sheet, that they can't get from looking at, you know, one of the budget document. And those are all important, and I think that that's, in the short time you have to spend with them, is something that you can focus on, and it's all the stuff you already know, right? So
yeah. If I can just illustrate with one story, we had a legislator that we called on, and he wound up coming out to our office, and then we had a survivor come and meet with him at our office, and she talked about the fact that not only had she been able to leave the abusive situation, but that she's still, all these years later, having to be really careful about where she goes, what she posts on social media. And the legislator was really blown away that, you know, that all these years, you know, 6-7 years later, she still was dealing with the impact. I don't think he ever realized the longevity that survivors have to deal with in terms of this. So it really, I think, made a strong impact on him. So those are the kinds of things I think that Maureen's talking about.
And I also want to say, before moving on, one last thing is that not to put a lot of pressure on yourself for this one meeting. As Marcia said, it's, for some, if you've not met with this legislator before, it's the beginning of building a relationship. And for others, you may have had other contacts, and it's another opportunity to speak with them. But it's part of a sort of a longer process of building the relationships, letting legislators know what you need, but then also letting them know when great things are happening in their communities. And so you shouldn't feel a ton of pressure on this one meeting. It's an opportunity to start building relationships if you haven't, and continue to build relationships if you do.
Absolutely.
So moving into some of the more detailed portions of the presentation, just sharing here the state budget process, because we're going to talk about budget for a little bit. There's a budget every year in Massachusetts, and the sort of formal part of that has already started in January. The governor releases his budget, and then it goes through this process that you see outlined. And so to the right, I kind of filled in some of the dates. So right now we're kind of between step 1 and step 2 here, waiting for the House Ways and Means budget to be released. So when you're meeting with legislators, neither the House or Senate budget has been released, but they are talking about it. Your legislators are already having meetings with their leadership about what their budget priorities are this year. And so we still have an opportunity to influence both the House and the Senate budget. You may hear from legislators. They've already met with leadership and given their priorities, but we don't feel like this is the only opportunity. So encourage them, you know, say that we'll be coming back to them at different parts of the process to let them know how they can continue to be supportive. So this just sort of highlights it. And, you know, in terms of the bigger picture of budget advocacy, we fall up there between 1 and 2 for Advocacy Day, but you'll continue to hear from me throughout the next 6 months about opportunities to then reach out again to your legislator to please support a budget amendment, or please contact leadership and tell them that you really think these services are important and that funding should be increased. So the budget request that we have this year is going to really be focused on the top line item here on this document. This is where now almost all of the sexual assault and domestic violence funding is through DPH. We know that you have other sources of funding, but what we're talking about in the state budget and at the Day of Action is these two particular line items. And so we're seeking an increase in the 4513-1130 line, and we're seeking level funding for the sexual assault nurse examiner line. And again, you're going to have a lot of materials, and there's a lot on our website to give you details about this that I won't take up today's time on, although happy to answer questions. So the breakdown of our request. So basically our request for this larger line item boils down to a request for $3.5 million for additional services. We break it down like this for you all and for the legislators to help explain why the numbers look different from last year to this year. As you may know, hopefully depends on your role in your organization, you may or may not know that all of the funding went through rate restructuring and procurement last year through the Department of Public Health. And so there was some changes on how things get paid for, how much things cost, how the state is purchasing those services. And so some of the money that looks like it could look like new money in the budget line item is really just money needed to maintain level services. And so that's what I show here is that fiscal year 18 was 31 million, but there is this sort of extra money needed to pay for level services, which is 2.2. And then the governor did, in the governor's budget that came out in January, propose $500,000 for a public awareness campaign. So that's important for you to know and for us to be sharing with legislators so that they don't perceive that that is for services, because it is not the intention that it is for services. And while the public awareness campaign will be beneficial and useful, we are still advocating for service dollars. That's where the $3.5 million comes in. And then there's a little bit of a note here, which hopefully won't be too challenging for folks, and we can continue to talk about this even at Advocacy Day. Because the rates are structured so kind of rigidly, we may need to seek some language in the budget that allows for any intended increases to be spent appropriately. Particularly rape crisis rates are kind of unusual in that they're based on geography and not on staffing. So I don't think you need to get into details with legislators about this, but we have shared this with them, and so you can always ask them to follow up with me if there are questions about this. So I'll just run through a few of the talking points, but you have this information. You know, again, when you're talking about budget with legislators, thanking them for their support. They often tell you it's a difficult budget year. Doesn't matter what year it is, but you know, we can recognize that and appreciate that they have difficult decisions that they have to make. We haven't seen an increase in several years, and that really it's our role to let them know what is needed in communities. And so, you know, if you get any kinds of comments like, well, it's a hard budget year, where's the money going to come from? That's really not your job to tell them where the money's going to come from. I think that you can very respectfully say, this is the work we do in our communities, and this is, it's important for us to let you know what is needed. And most legislators are very appreciative of that. They want that information and they care about this information.
I think, Maureen, the other thing too that we can say, and it's addressed somewhat in the budget talking points, is that a lot of the work that we're doing now comes out of the new RFR, which really mandates us to work with more underserved populations, to do more outreach to those populations, and those things take an incredible amount of time and capacity. There's a lot more complexity, so that the capacity needs are really great.
That's an excellent point.
Not to mention that if the governor's $500,000 public awareness campaign actually happens, we know there's going to even further increase demand for services.
Excellent. Yes, that's definitely a good talking point. And so this slide just sort of talks about some different ways in which we're letting legislators know that folks are trying to build capacity. Because as you know, we're a membership organization. The folks who receive this funding are very wide-ranging in your organizations and the types of needs that you're still trying to meet in your community. So we don't have a budget ask that says everybody should get a person to do X. You know, this really has to be sort of community specific, but in order to sort of identify funding in a way to articulate it to legislators, we talk about, you know, the ability to have more rape crisis advocates and community-based domestic violence advocates across the state. And it could be to the things that Marcia was saying around, you know, building language capacity, reaching underserved communities, doing more culturally specific work, outreach, education, prevention. So thinking about what really resonates for you, those can be your talking points. And I do want to just mention the Me Too movement and how that's emerged since the fall of last year. We've been gathering some information from you all. It's been pretty profound in some communities how the service requests have been increased and how many more requests you're getting for doing prevention or going to different schools or building different relationships that people hadn't been asking for before. So those are really good things to think about now before you come to the day of action to sort of highlight for your legislators. Any other thoughts about budget, Marcia, that you wanted to bring up before we move on to the bills?
No, I think you've covered it pretty well. If something comes to mind, I'll jump in. But at the moment,
and if folks again, great. If folks again have questions, please chat them on the box. If we don't catch them right now, we can follow up with them as well. So Jane Doe has 3 legislative priorities this year. We support a number of bills throughout the legislative session. And just to give a little background on the legislative cycle and where we are, I don't have a specific slide on that, but the legislative session in Massachusetts is 2 years long. And so we are in the 2nd year of the legislative session, which is making now a really fast-moving, kind of complicated time, but it's very exciting and things are happening. So last year was the first year. Bills get filed in the very beginning of the session. They go to committees, they have committee hearings, they move or they don't move. And so now that we're in the 2nd year, all the bills have had a hearing. Most of the bills have either moved out of committee or are going to be moved out of committee or may not make it out of committee. Those are the options. But we've had a lot of activity on our priority legislation. And you'll receive a documents on each of the bills, the 3 priority bills, but then sort of a legislative priority that lists some of the other bills that we also support in addition to these 3. So where do we go first? Campus sexual assault legislation. This is a really become an important priority for us this year because of the federal government sort of rollbacks on Title IX and concerns about what, you know, kind of continuing to support institutions of higher education to really do the right thing for students on campus who are experiencing sexual assault and to do what they can for prevention efforts in this, to prevent sexual assault. And so you'll see here just some kind of bullet points about what the bill does. This bill is pretty comprehensive. It's, you know, related to ensuring that schools have policies, to require training for students, faculty, and staff, requires MOUs with your programs and the institutions of higher ed that just creates an opportunity to collaborate. And some folks are doing this already. So it's really around trying to ensure that universities and other institutions are making those local program connections and making those services available to students. And again, making sure students know how to get services, how to access protective measures on campus, and to give them some communication sources on campus that will ensure that their privacy is protected. Now, these are just a few sort of statistical talking points. They're on the fact sheet. You can certainly sort of refresh yourself on them if you're going to be talking about this bill with your legislator. So just good data points to have. But again, you can leave these behind on the fact sheet with legislators too. So you don't have to memorize them. You don't have to make sure you say all of them, but they're just some really good reasons why we need to address this issue in Massachusetts. And again, here's another sort of a cost of sexual violence, which can be compelling to legislators, particularly as they're concerned about, costs, that it's certainly a cost saving to actually prevent sexual violence. And this is beyond the campus sexual assault, but it's an important point to be reminding legislators. And the other part that I want to just briefly talk about is why we need this and why we need it now in Massachusetts. And these are questions that will come up for you. And I think that I also want to say that we're developing some detailed talking points that include some of this information and some other information to help support you being prepared for these conversations. But really, as I said, this has become an urgent piece of legislation because of the rollbacks on the federal level. You may get questions about due process for people who are accused of sexual violence. And I have some responses here, but we're sort of fleshing those out for you, and we'll be posting those on our website before the day of action. And really, talking to legislators about, under the Obama administration, frankly, there was a lot of progress made in terms of, and Title IX has been around for a really long time, but the guidance that came out that really kind of spelled out for schools how to create an equitable process for survivors and for schools who weren't responding appropriately. And so much progress has been made in the past, 7 or 8 years. And, what's happening now at the federal level is going to begin to impact that. And so we really want in Massachusetts to be codifying the important provisions that were in the guidance to make sure that folks have what they need on campuses and that campuses are doing the right thing. So the status, go ahead.
I would just add to that even, and this seems like a no-brainer, but I'll say it anyway, even if you don't have a college or university in your particular service area, you no doubt have lots of college students that are living across the Commonwealth. So it's an important issue, even if you're not particularly working with a college or a university. It's a really important bill.
That's a really good point. And what I find interesting in my conversations with legislators, the folks that are so interested in this are legislators who have kids in college. Mm-hmm. So if we'll talk a little bit about meeting with your legislators a little bit later on, but if you know this about them, you can appeal to sort of their, sometimes that means that they have other strong opinions that we think might not be super helpful, like that all campus sexual assault should go to law enforcement. But I think you can help talk to them about, why this is important, and a lot of them think it's important, and you can kind of fill in the gaps in their knowledge and education about Title IX, about sexual assault on campus, and about sexual assault survivors, because those of you who are sexual assault programs and also DV programs, because this bill will actually address domestic violence on campus as well. And so bringing what you know about domestic violence and sexual assault in general, and what are sort of the common misconceptions, and what are the experiences of survivors, why they might not report to law enforcement, and so forth, is opportunities to talk about that in this conversation as well. So the good news about this bill is that it has already passed the Senate. Every bill has to pass both the Senate and the House, and then it gets reconciled, or maybe they pass the same exact version. And once that happens, it goes to the governor for signing. So this bill has made it halfway through the process. It's currently in the committee, the House Committee on Ways and Means, which is a very typical process. That committee is looking at it right now. We've had meetings with them, and the next step would be for them to release it for a vote for the full House. to vote on it. And so depending on what happens between now and the day of action, we will be asking you to ask your House members, your representatives, to be advocating with House leadership to bring this to a vote so that the House members can vote on it and it can move along in the process. And, you know, while you're at it, if you're meeting with your senators, you can thank them for their support. So it's always a good thing to have something to thank people for when you're going in. And again, you'll have a document that is giving you the most up-to-date status of where the bills are, so you know what you'll be asking that day. In other good news, the patch bill, we don't have to really do a lot of advocacy on. This is the Act to Protect Confidential Healthcare, which you've probably been hearing from us about for a number of years. And this is, you know, this slide sort of explains what the bill does. It makes sure that folks who are able to consent to their own medical care can maintain their privacy around their health care via their insurance. So if you are a dependent on your spouse's insurance or your parents' insurance, they should not have access to your confidential health information. And this bill would prohibit that from happening, and so it would allow an individual to have their explanation of benefits form sent directly to them or sent in a different way, so it doesn't go to their house or the parent's house, and so that that ensures some privacy. And this has been really important for the sexual assault and domestic violence community to be weighing in on, because this really impacts survivors in many ways, in terms of safety, in terms of being able to feel that you can safely access healthcare, and that information won't get shared without your willingness to do so, or if you're just not ready to do so, to share some things with your parents. But the bill has passed both the House and the Senate, and so there's just one difference between the two bills that we're hoping will get resolved fairly quickly, and it will go to the governor's desk. So this is going to be another thank you that we'll be able to do on the day of action. So it's really exciting. You know, if we get there on the 26th, then it's sitting on the governor's desk, then, you know, we can just thank our House members and Senate members for making this happen. So we'll keep you posted, but we don't think this will be a heavy lift for Advocacy Day, which is great news. Safe Communities Act. This bill is a little bit more complicated, and it's a little, we're in the middle of some strategic changes around this. And so what we'll talk about here is the original Safe Communities bill, and I won't get into the provisions. You can see them all here. There's a large coalition of organizations that have supported this originally filed bill that was filed by Senator Eldridge and Rep. Matias. Jane Doe is a member of the coalition. I know a number of our member programs, perhaps some of you on the call are a member of this coalition and have been very active in advocating for this from the perspective of immigrant survivors of sexual and domestic violence and their families. So there are some important provisions around, you know, preventing local law enforcement from acting as ICE agents, and we're really trying to ensure that people feel safe in their communities, to come forward for services, to be able to have your kids go to school, to, you know, any number of things. And what we've heard a lot from our members, from you all, is that the current climate, I mean, and even before that, this isn't anything new, but it's become highly intensified in the last year with some of the federal executive orders and the immigration processes that have been just kind of ramping up across states across the country. And so one of the things that because this is a little bit complicated, I do think it's a really good opportunity to be educating legislators on why this is important to you all as folks who are working with immigrant survivors. Because I think sometimes legislators haven't thought about what that is like for somebody who just feels like they can't call the police, or even feel like they can't go to a local program for services. And so the things that you're hearing from folks in your community, those are the kinds of things that would be super helpful to share. So the originally filed bills have been sent to study, so they're currently not going to move in this legislative session. There was a new amended version filed by Senator Eldridge and Rep. Matias, and there's been a lot of discussion among the Safe Communities Coalition about whether to support that bill. The latest news on that, and that's still evolving, and we're having a strategy meeting on Friday, is that there was enough concern about the changes that were in the amended version that the Safe Communities Coalition is not going to support the current bill. I'll be sharing more information about that, and we are part of that coalition. You know, we still think it's okay to be talking about the original provisions and why those kinds of things are important. There may be some options, which is what we need to learn more about on Friday, to advocate for some of those same provisions in the budget. And just for folks who are a little bit less familiar with the budget, sometimes the budget is mostly about money and how we're going to spend the money in the state and what are the priorities of the legislature and the administration. But there are also sometimes outside sections where there's policy in the budget. And so we're learning more about that, and so there may be some points that we're asking folks to talk about on the day of action as those evolve. But again, it's an opportunity for us to be at the forefront of this conversation and to be letting legislators know why this is so important to us and why it's important on the community level. So I apologize that that's a little bit complicated and uncertain, but it's kind of the nature of policy. So we'll make sure that you have the best information on the day of action. And then this slide just really is intended to identify some of the issues that I just mentioned earlier, what we're hearing from programs. So if these are some things that survivors in your communities are experiencing, it's really important to share those with legislators, and bring that very real experience to the conversation. So that was really fast on 3 bills, some more complicated than others. Do you folks have any questions they want to ask in the chat? Or Marcia, do you have anything that you want to add to any of these?
No, I think that it feels like a lot, and sometimes when you're in the meeting with the legislator, it feels like you've got a lot to talk about. So I guess my suggestion would be pick 1 or 2 things. If you're going to talk about these acts, and the Patch Act, again, it may just be a thank you, but pick 1 or 2 things that you can really highlight, again, impact your community and the folks you're seeing. So if you're seeing, if you're working with immigrants, if you have a large immigrant community that is in your catchment area, and you're hearing that people are really afraid to come forward, and you can relate, you can hear, you can talk about some of the things you're hearing from your clients and other folks in your community. Don't feel like you have to go through all of it, but pick 1 or 2 really relevant points to make to your legislator, because it is a lot to go through, and oftentimes you will have a small window, so don't feel like you have to. I think if you can go with 1 or 2 points in a deeper way rather than feel like you have to cover every item.
Thank you, Marcia. That is such an important point. I really don't want anybody walking away, or either today or on Advocacy Day, feeling like, oh my God, I have to say all these things. I mean, this is really just to help give you some more information to help prepare you, but absolutely, you're not going to have time to talk about everything that you want to talk about. So really, just like Marcia said, just think about what are the things that are resonating in your communities, and you're going to leave all this material behind that say we support this. So, so don't feel overwhelmed by that. I do have a question here that looks like it's about the budget. With regard to the 500,000 public awareness campaign, and this is what is being proposed by the governor's in the governor's budget. We have already reached out to the Lieutenant Governor and the Secretary of Health and Human Services about this. It's right now not a defined thing, and I think if it makes its way through the budget, we will certainly, I believe that we, Jane Doe, will be consulted, and we will have opinions about that, and we will be talking with you all about your opinions on that. As we understand it, it's not an identified, formulated campaign. They just want to have a campaign. So that's the good news, is that it's not set in stone what that's going to be, so that we can have some influence on it. So if legislators are asking specifically about that, I think that is a good response, that it's fair to say that it's not an identified campaign right now. Like, it's not, you know, I can't even think of a campaign to give an example. It's not like we're going to implement the No More campaign across Massachusetts, but that there'll be a process for identifying what that is. And I believe it's going to be probably managed through the Governor's Council. So if legislators really have questions, you can refer them to me, or, you know, let them know that this is coming from the Health and Human Services and the Lieutenant Governor's Council. So, great. Any other questions? Well, we'll just keep watching the chat box, so we won't. We will move on.
And just as a reminder to folks that the group chat, you can get into it by hovering over the More button if you have the control panel open. But if some folks are joining us by browser, you may not be able to access the group chat, or by phone you won't be able to access, but feel free to email us and ask us questions in other ways too.
Yeah, certainly if questions come up beyond this time period of this call too, I'm pretty sure you all have my email address from the many emails I send you all, so don't hesitate to ask. Okay, so we have another poll question. So please chime in with whether or not you know who your state senator and state representatives are, and there's no judgment here, just trying to get a sense. Okay, well, we've got quite a few responses, and most people do. That's excellent. That's really good. And it's okay if you don't, because we're going to tell you how to find out. Because this is sort of, it's related to you coming to Advocacy Day to talk to your legislators about your program and the work of your program, but it's really great to know who your individual representative and senator is, so that when maybe you're meeting with that senator to talk about, you know, my program, but it's super helpful to say, I'm also actually a constituent of yours. I live in such and such community. I mean, they may sometimes, even when you're calling to make an appointment, say, is anyone in the group a constituent of the legislator? And it makes a difference to them. So great, thanks for participating. If you don't know, this is the website that you can find out who your legislator is. And actually, this is actually a really good website where you can put in your you put in your address and you put in your zip code, and you'll get your whole list of everybody. So you'll get your U.S. Congressperson, your senators, your governor, your district attorney, your attorney general, your state senator, your state representative. And so it's just really great to be informed about that, and kind of building your own personal relationship as a constituent, and being more comfortable with, you know, when we send something out and ask folks to make calls, or, you know, whether they're issues related to Jane Doe or other issues that you're active in your community, sort of getting to know the folks in their office, getting to know, you know, the legislative aides and the people in the districts is a really great opportunity to do that. And so check out that website. We're going to get into legislative meetings, and Marcia's going to talk a little bit about that. But I do want to answer this other question that came around a social media toolkit. for the day of action. And yes, we're working on that. So we will be sending something out. Well, we have something available for you that day, but we'll be posting that ahead of time too. So if folks want to get prepared with tweets or Facebook posts, you know, we'll give you kind of hashtags and ways that you can, you know, tweet at your actual legislators. Great if you even want to post pictures from your meetings. That would be really helpful, hopefully, to you. So we'll get that out to you soon. And let's see, we're going to talk about legislative meetings now. And I do want to, and Marcia, I'm going to send this over to you, but I also want to just make a note that, and maybe Marcia, you're going to say this, that you may or may not be meeting with a legislator. You may be meeting with legislative aides. That is as important. And so I would treat those meetings exactly the same and with the same level of respect. And the aides are actually can be really strong allies and can be so important in getting your issues in front of the legislators. So I just want to preface with that, but I do want to turn that over to Marcia to talk a little bit about this based on your experience with how legislative meetings go.
Okay, well, thanks. And I agree. One of the things I was going to say is the importance of, if you are meeting with an aide or a staff person, to treat them with the same respect and the same manner that you would treat a legislator, because they are often the gatekeepers to the legislator. So it's really important. And oftentimes, my experience most of the time at the State House is I am meeting with the legislative aides or the staff person. So I would not consider that as, oh, I wasn't as successful, or this maybe won't go anywhere. I think that's really an important point. I do think if you have some time before you go to check out a little bit of research on your legislator, it's important, because there may be some connection. You may find out this person went to the same college you did, so you can kind of figure out a way to bring that into the conversation. Oh yes, I'm a BU alum myself. I see you went to BU. Or just other ways to make connections. If it says they have college-age children, then that might be a way to bring in the campus sexual assault bill. So if you have time to do that, that can be very helpful. And again, you know, starting with the thank yous if they've been supportive in the past, or just thanking them if they haven't been supportive, just thanking them for their public service, because it is a public service to be in the legislature. And then really, again, as Maureen said, if you are a constituent, even better when you introduce yourself, to let them know you live in their district, that you really appreciate everything that they do for the district. I think that's really important. The other thing is to be aware of in terms of just going to these meetings, there'll be oftentimes a lot of waiting. You'll hurry up to get to an office. Don't be surprised if you have to wait quite a bit. There's a lot of waiting that happens. So just in terms of logistical stuff, if you want to bring something to read while you're sitting in the office waiting for your appointment, that can be a good thing just to have, or just making sure you're going over your notes for the meeting. I think for myself, the first couple of times I did this, I was extremely nervous, particularly when I met with a legislator, to really put my ask out there. But over the years, I've come to realize we are the experts. When we're sitting there talking, whether it's the representative, the senator, or their aides, we are the experts. We're educating them. These are things they really don't know a lot about. So I think if you can go in with that mindset, just like, you know, the school education folks go in and educate them about, you know, the needs of the higher ed or public school systems, that we are the experts around sexual and domestic violence needs. And so we are there to really educate them. And then I think, again, when you're talking about the priorities, just acknowledge that these are difficult situations. I've had legislators say, well, what is this going to mean for my district? You know, what's that going to mean for Attleboro specifically, or for Taunton specifically? And again, I would say that to let them know that we are part of a coalition. We are engaged in statewide advocacy, and these dollars, while I can't say that it's specifically going to be 2 staff persons or 1 staff person, is that the money will support increased capacity for us to work with survivors. We don't know exactly how that will play out because obviously we don't know what's going to happen with the budget, but that these things will in fact result in better and more services and more informed and more comprehensive services to the clients that we serve. So you can go over the budget request. You can talk about, this is where you really want to give a story, talk about the importance of this work in the district. If you have a story you can tell, if you have numbers that you can show that hotline calls have increased, demand for services, for counseling and advocacy services have increased, all of those things are really important. Again, specifically if you can relate it right to their district. Those are the things they really want to hear. And then you can go over some of the legislative priorities that we're talking about. But I think the most important thing is to have information on the client served from their district, and then what you're seeing in the district. What sorts of trends do you see emerging? Are you seeing more LGBTQ folks coming for services? Are you seeing more culturally different cultures, different ethnicities coming for services? Are you seeing more men reach out for services? So, as an example, one thing I will say is that we had a call from a young man as a result of the Me Too movement who recognized he had been sexually assaulted when he was a child at a private boarding school and never really told anyone and had a lot of shame about it. And through the Me Too movement, he actually got the courage to pick up the phone and call us for services. So those are the kinds of things you can talk about, the impact of the Me Too movement and how that's impacting the number of calls that you may be getting through your hotline or requests for services if you're seeing that. But whatever trends you may be seeing, if you're not sure of those, talk to some of the folks in your organization before you go, just to get an idea of what they're seeing, what kinds of things are they hearing from their clients. So, and I don't know what particular positions those on the webinar here have in your organizations, but talk to some of your coworkers if they're not going and get some information from them that you can also share. And then lastly, I would say, ask them to support our request and what they might need. They may say, as Maureen mentioned earlier, well, I've already given my priorities to the leadership. Well, I would just say, well, what could I do to, what could I give you, or what would you need to be able to also include us in your support? And again, recognizing that there's a lot of priorities and you understand that, but that this is a really important issue in their district and affects many of their constituents. And then finally, leave the information with them. As it says, it's always important, I think, to follow up with a written thank you note. If I meet with an aide, I also send a thank you note to the aide or whoever I met with. So make sure you get a card from the aide so you will remember who that person is. And then once you leave, I always find it helpful before I go to my next meeting or wherever I'm going to sit down and make my notes so I will remember. Because if you're doing quite a few visits, it's hard to remember at the end of the day who said what and what was this aide's name. So if you can have a little bit of time after each one to just jot your notes down. But I think the biggest thing I want to say around this is that you are the expert. So while it might seem somewhat intimidating to go in and talk to your representative, you are really the person that they will look to, and to let them know if they have any questions, if there's anyone in their district that reaches out to them, that they can reach out to you. Because I often get calls from legislators when someone reaches out to them about a domestic or sexual violence situation. So let them know that they can always reach out to you, that you are there to support them. And I always also ask, what can I do to support you around this work, or to support you in the district around domestic and sexual violence issues? Because they will get calls, and they do often get calls. But again, my one takeaway is, remember, you are the expert. You are there to educate them, to tell them what's going on. You're really the eyes and ears in the district in terms of this particular topic and what's happening with their constituents. So I would just kind of keep that in mind. And I think that's really all I have to say.
That's great, Marcia. And as you were speaking, and I apologize, there's a siren going on in my background, so hopefully you can hear me. I had a few random sort of thoughts to add as well. Marcia talked about, advocating as a coalition for budget. And, that is something that we do. And as members of Jane Doe, all programs agree to a unified budget request and to not request earmarks. And so it can be, as Marcia described, talking about it, that this request will support the network of services across the state. So even if you can't identify how much money an individual program will get, it's important that it will build capacity to meet the needs of survivors all across Massachusetts. And just a couple of other technical things, thinking about how you space out your meetings as you make appointments, to sort of build in some time, as Marcia said, in case you have to wait. Maybe the legislator really wants to meet with you, but there's a vote on the floor, so you have to wait for them to come back. Just giving yourself enough time in between meetings. You may have a 15-minute meeting, but it might get started later. So you're trying to schedule them at least a half an hour apart is usually, pretty safe to do that. I would also suggest, in terms of how many visits you're having, you could be doing a lot of visits, so wear comfortable shoes. I recommend dressing professionally, but you also need to be comfortable. So think about those kinds of things as well. If you'll be walking around for, a lot of time, you want to make sure that you're able to do that. There is a cafeteria at the State House. So if you need to get water, we'll have some of that in the morning, but there is a space there if you need some food, if you need something to drink.
Maureen, will you have a list of the various rooms of the representatives? I always have found the most frustrating thing for me is walking around trying to find the offices.
Yeah, it's been interesting because we've been trying to find a really good updated floor plan and we can't find one, but we will try to have a couple of copies, even if we don't have it for everyone, just because they're not really great documents, but we'll also be around to sort of help direct people. There is a little bit more signage on the walls about what numbers are that way, what room numbers are the other way, and it can be complicated. So we'll help people navigate that.
Yeah, so just know, I get lost every year at least once or twice. So if you feel like you're going around in circles, welcome to the club. I think that's just part of being at the State House.
And, people who look like they belong there, you can certainly ask for directions.
Absolutely.
The security folks will be very helpful. But, if you see other people walking around, feel free to ask, directions. People get it. It's a weirdly structured building, so it can be really confusing. And I just want to make one other note around political parties. The issues of sexual assault and domestic violence, we really see as bipartisan issues, that they're not Democrat or Republican. We certainly have allies in both parties at the State House who support the work that we do. They may have different approaches and we may work differently with them depending on what their approaches are, but I would encourage folks that even if you have a strong partisan identification, to be entering into meetings with folks who maybe are in a party that you don't agree with or aren't a member of, to kind of try to leave that by the side and just really focus on the issues and the content of what you're discussing. And I think that's a professional approach, and you can certainly react to things that you aren't maybe happy to hear, and again, do that respectfully. Yeah, so because sometimes that can be hard, and just trying to maintain professionalization, just as you do in any of your other communications with folks. And so actually, I think we've talked about all the items on this slide, but emphasize that second bullet there. If you don't know an answer, that's okay. You're not expected to know everything. Offer to find out and follow up, and make sure you do follow up, whether that's a conversation with me or you just needed to get some information from your program. Just make sure you get back to them.
Yeah, I would say the follow-up's really important. There's one legislator here in our district, in part of our catchment area, who politically is very much at the opposite end from where I am, and we don't always agree, and we've talked about that. But one thing he said to me recently, because I sent him some information about the Patch Act, is, well, you always give me really good information. So I think that, and we know we agree to disagree on many things, but I think we have been able to develop a respect for each other in terms of what we do and how we do it. So I think that's an important point.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of part of ethical communication, and you can have your own personal political opinions and activism that you do, but your organization doesn't support one or can't support one candidate over another. So those kind of conversations can just, and they won't ask that, but you can just leave that at the door.
Right.
I have a question about setting up individual meetings and the best way to do that. I mean, if you have a legislative aide that you know and have their email address, feel free to email them. But if emailing the legislator directly is not going to be the best way to schedule a meeting unless you have a good relationship with that legislator. So I would call the office. They may say, send an email to so-and-so who's the scheduler. But making a phone call to the office is probably the best first step to schedule a meeting and let them know you're there for Advocacy Day, you'd love to come by, and follow whatever their process then is. Again, unless you have, somebody who's, you're very connected to, and just say, hey, here's our Advocacy Day date, we're coming, can we schedule a meeting?
I would just say the other thing as well is, if there's no way for you to meet with them on Advocacy Day, ask if there's a time when the representative will be in the district, and if you can meet with them in the district.
That's great. That's a great alternative. And then if you get there and you can't meet with them because something's changed, you can leave the materials, and then maybe want to follow up with a district meeting too. It's a great idea. I mean, some of your programs may cover such big service areas that you have 15 or 20 or more legislators. It's not going to be realistic that you meet with them all. So, you can think about which ones you want to meet with, and then, and the other thing that we didn't really talk about is that you all share legislators with other programs. Mm-hmm. So we can help you identify that. Some of you already know that, like you're the Domestic Violence Program, you know who the Rape Crisis Center is. Maybe you're both going, and you can either divide up the legislators or go together. That can be really helpful for legislators to understand, why are there 2 or 3 programs that serve my community? Well, that's because Program 1 provides this service, Program 2 provides something else, and Program 3 provides something else. So it's kind of a really interesting way to be able to help them understand the services in their communities.
Yes, that's always very confusing to them. I remember one year I seemed to be following the YWCA in Worcester, because we do supervised visitation and IPAE, and the legislators were having a hard time, well, wait, someone was just in here. So, that's a really good point, Maureen. Yeah, so even if you can't coordinate shared meetings, and I know some of you do this, some programs do it, they do it every year, and so they've got it sort of down. Mm-hmm. Just knowing who the other programs are in your area so that you can answer those questions. Like, well, why was the Y here? What do they do that's different than what you do? So that you can answer that. Mm-hmm. Before we sort of move on to kind of wrapping up here, I do want to give an opportunity for folks, to sort of let us know through the chat box, and you can do this privately or to the whole group, about things you might be having some concerns or hesitations about, that we could try to help address. Like, maybe what's kind of the thing that you're like, I'm not really sure how to deal with this when this happens, or how to approach this. Some of the questions coming through are really, I think, addressing that, but if there are any other questions you want to put forth, please do so. As we're waiting for people to think about this, I know that
when I very first started doing this work, I some of the fears were not knowing all the answers. And so you kind of have to move on from that fear because you never will know all the answers, and kind of being prepared to how to respond. And also being nervous that you might get a negative response from a legislator. And I think that, it's been my experience here at the State House that doesn't happen very often. For the most part, legislators really want to hear from their constituents. They're respectful of their constituents. You potentially vote for them, so they, that's in the back of their mind. So, that's not to say that, 100% everybody's nice all the time, but I really have had very positive experiences for the most part, and would absolutely want to hear if you aren't having that, if there's anything we can do to support around that. But I think that was what when I first started doing these kind of visits, I was sort of like, oh my gosh, what if they're like coming at me and with a lot of questions and being really negative? And I just really haven't had that experience for the most part.
I think the other thing, Maureen, that I know you did with the other 2 sessions in person that we really don't have the ability to do in a webinar, but if you have a chance to practice with a coworker before you go, practice the points that you want to get out. So I know it might sound a little contrived, but really just practicing ahead of time what you want to say and how you want to say it can really be very beneficial when you're in that meeting. So if you're comfortable with a coworker and have some time to just practice a little bit, it doesn't have to be a full-blown role play, but just have someone listen to, okay, here's the points I want to make, here's what I'm going to say, give me some feedback. I think that can help as well. And it can maybe make you feel a little more prepared, so maybe a little less nervous when you get in there.
That's a really great idea, because then you're at least saying out loud some of the things you want to say and kind of organizing your thoughts. I think that's an excellent idea. And because we're doing Advocacy Day at the State House this year, we've done some role play demonstrations in past years when we've been off-site that are helpful to people. We're just not going to be able to do that. So that's a really good alternative, is to just, sit down with folks at your office and kind of talk through some of this stuff. And I went to this next slide because this website link, again, is where we're posting all of these materials that we'll be providing you. There's still 1 or 2 things not quite there yet, but there's a lot of materials up there already. So you can go on and see the budget document and look at the fact sheets that we have, and you can already be looking at them and reviewing them, so you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm getting all this information on Monday morning and I have to go have a meeting on Monday afternoon. All of the information is there. I think the pieces that probably aren't there yet are the more detailed talking points, which we're working on because it's an ever-changing environment right now, and the social media information isn't finalized, but there's a lot of information there through Member Lodge. And if you're having any trouble with Member Lodge, which is Jane Doe's private website, give us a call and we can make sure that you have a password, like you're hooked up with a password if you don't already have one.
And I think, just to be clear, I know we all have legislators, representatives and senators, but I think the focus right now, because of the budget process, should really be on the representatives. Maybe that goes without saying, but I just want to encourage that as well, just so folks know that if you can only see so many folks, while it might be nice to call on your senators, right now the action is really in the House.
And yeah, I think that's especially if you can follow up with your senators later, because senators are having some of these meetings with their leadership already too. But you're right in terms of that's really the next step. And the other piece of that is that the campus bill is in the House. So you can be asking them for 2 things. Let's pass this, and we're going to need your support in a couple weeks on the budget when it comes out of the House. So yeah, so I do think it is hard to prioritize. If you we can give you, if we haven't already, some of you we have given like a list of your legislators. Shoot me an email, we can get that to you. You can look them up and, you know, see who's on what committee. If your legislator's on Ways and Means, either the House or the Senate, they're part of the budget decision process. So I would say if you focus on those folks. If you have a legislator who is in leadership in any way, so someone who is the acting Senate president, or the majority leader or the minority leader, or in the House, there's a number of folks in leadership. There's different, what do they call them?
Are they the whips?
Yeah, like there's a whips, and there's sort of regional, I forget what they're called, but anyway, you can go, there's actually a page on the MA Legislature website, which I'm gonna try to be clever and type in the chat box here. The website, which has everything you ever wanted to know about the Massachusetts legislature. So you can go and look at, you can get the phone numbers for your legislators, their email addresses, their pictures if you want to know what they look like, the bills that they filed. I mean, there's a lot of information. You don't have time to read it all, I'm sure. But you can go into the committees. You can, if you look at their profile, it will tell you what committees they're on, if they have a leadership position. They also have a page of just leadership. So you can click on senators, there'll be a leadership page, and you can see who the leaders are. So if you're trying to prioritize, you can focus on leaders, focus on people on Ways and Means Committee. And if you have questions about that, if you're just looking at it saying, oh my God, who should I go visit? I get emails like that from folks all the time, so I can help think it through. And some of it is, this is a new person. They may not be in leadership, but you want to sort of build and foster a new relationship with a new legislator. That's good too. So.
And I think the other thing with Sexual Assault Awareness Month coming up, if you're having any events in the district, to be sure and invite the legislator to come out to that particular event so that they can see a little bit more of the work that you're doing, that this can highlight some of the really great work that you're doing. I mean, we spoke a lot about the budget process and the ask, but I guess the other thing I want to say is don't be shy about really talking about the good work that the program is doing, because everyone around the state is doing incredible work. And so, you know, this is a chance to really kind of toot your own horn, so to speak, and really really tell them the good things that you're doing. And there's been lots of successes in the programs, I know. And so don't be shy about saying that, and invite them if you're having an event, a public event for Sexual Assault Awareness Month or any public event. Ask them to come and meet with your staff and learn a little bit more about what's happening in their district.
Yeah, and I think that's good too, so that you're not only ever seeing them when you are asking for something, right? So that you have a sort of richer relationship with them, but that they understand you when you do have something that you're asking for. So that's a really great strategy to bring them on, you know, invite them to things. And
I think going back to what you said at the very beginning, Maureen, it's really about developing a relationship. And so if you look at that, this is the start of a relationship. So even I know I read the local papers, and if I see something about my legislator in the paper that they've done something or they've won an award, a local award, I send them a little thank you note, you know, or a little congratulations note, you know. So think of it as really you're starting to develop that relationship.
That's great. Those are great suggestions. I did have a question about whether we would be sending out the slides. We will post the PowerPoint on this website that you see on your screen. We'll post it on the Member Lodge website for sure. Make sure that if you haven't registered yet, you do. I'm assuming everybody on the call is planning to come, and you may have already registered, so thank you if you have. We're really excited. It's such a, you know, we've been talking about all the details, but it really is a fun, amazing, energizing day. So even for folks who already do some of this advocacy, even if you do it in district, it's great to have to show that we are mighty, that we are, you know, we have numbers, and we really care about survivors, and we know they do, and we're there to tell them, you know, what they need to do to support them. And so it's a really great day. And for folks who haven't been, I'm really excited that you're coming, and I think it's really going to be a great opportunity. And if there's other things that you need in support, please let us know. I do want to give another quick opportunity as we're kind of winding up. If people have other questions that are coming to your mind here in the last few minutes, please type them in the chat box.
And I do want to second what Maureen said. I think sometimes it's really, when you're out away from the Boston area, it's easy to feel like you're out here and yes, we're part of a coalition, but there's not that connection you can feel. And when you're at the State House with all of your peers and sister agencies and everyone's there, and there is an excitement and an energy, and you really do feel part of a bigger movement, which I think is really one of the important things about going to Lobby Day and being there and just feeling like, yes, we are connected, we are strong, we are, you know, we are mighty, and we're doing really great work across the Commonwealth. And it really is an energizing day. And Jane Doe has done amazing work. I will just shout out to Jane Doe, because none of this would really happen without the efforts of Maureen and all of Jane Doe to really do this year after year. So hats off to Jane Doe.
Well, thank you, Marcia. And we're going to launch a survey poll. This is just a quick evaluation while we're kind of having final comments here. So if people want to be filling it in, it's anonymous. We just want to see how we can do things better, what was helpful, those kind of things. But so please do fill that out while we're chatting here. I thank you, Marcia, for saying that. And I would also say that, you know, sort of the role of the coalition is to sort of help bring people together, and it wouldn't happen without all of you participating, you know, really being in partnership with one another and with us on, you know, what are the things that you want to see us advocate for, and how do you want to get together. And we do advocacy days in different formats and different ways, and we're always open to new ways and interesting suggestions that you have. But really, it's you know, it's kind of corny, but I've said this, like when I go to the State House and I see a legislator from Salem, I want them to see Hawk or North Shore Rape Crisis Center and be like, okay, that's who they're representing, because I can be there more. But they make those connections because they hear from you and they know about your programs. And so it really is a partnership. And you know, we're excited for the day, and we're excited for, you know, the weeks and months to come. So thank you all for participating today, and we'll leave this open while folks are filling out the survey.
Yeah, and so folks who are joining us either via the browser or via in multiple groups or via phone probably aren't able to access the poll right now, or the survey that we have visible right now. So we'll be sending that out in an email following this webinar, including some of the materials that Maureen has shared as well. Thank you all again for participating today. We're going to leave this open while folks finish up the evaluation. And we hope to see you all on JDI Day of Action on March 26th. Thank you for participating, and we hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Ayana, for the technology expertise.
Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for joining in.